The folks over at Anthropic who developed Claude and Claude 2 have just made a really big announcement that affects us all as authors using AI. Let's get into it. So Anthropic just announced Claude Pro. This is essentially the Anthropic equivalent of ChatGPT that gives you a couple of extra benefits and features that you don't get in the free version. And I'm going to talk a little bit about whether it's going to be worth it to you to take this upgrade or not, and whether you should wait until new features come out. But basically, it's a very short blog post announcing this whole thing because there isn't a whole lot to it. And basically, Claude Pro now gives you 5 times more usage of the latest model, and that it would be Claude 2. There really isn't a model above Claude 2 right now, so one of the big differences between this and ChatGPT Plus is ChatGPT Plus gives you access to GPT-4, which is their higher end model. With this, both the free and the paid version get access to their highest end model. The big difference here is that you get 5 times more usage. So if you are among the people, and I know there are many of you, who were constantly finding yourself up against that usage limit, this might be something you might want to look at. The price is $20 in the US or £18 UK. And unfortunately, even though it's been a little while since Anthropic created this chat bot service here to access Claude, it is still only available in the US and the UK. So if you are outside of those two countries, you will either have to figure out a way to access it through a VPN, or perhaps you can just wait. I'm sure we'll roll out to other countries in the future. But so far, both the free version and now this Pro version are only available US and UK. So what does Claude Pro offer? Well, the main thing, I think, and the most attractive thing is this 5 times more usage than the free tier. And this doesn't tell you exactly what that means, but there is a Q&A that gives a lot more clarity on this. I'll get into that in a second. The other thing that it says here is priority access to Claude during high traffic periods, which, makes sense. That's this feature that ChatGPT Plus also offered as well. And early access to new features that help you get the most out of Claude. Again, this is another thing that we saw with ChatGPT Plus. So really, they're kind of modeling things very similarly. The price is about the same. The fact that you get more usage, that you get priority access to new features, those are all things that we got at ChatGPT Plus over the free version of ChatGPT. The only difference is ChatGPT Plus also gives you access to GPT-4, which is a lot better than GPT 3.5. With Claude, you basically only have access to Claude 2. There is no older model of Claude that is available through Anthropic's official chatbot here. But I will say the free version of Claude is a lot better than the free version of ChatGPT and might even rival ChatGPT Plus. So it really depends on what you prefer and whether you like using Claude or not. And the other thing I wanted to highlight is in their Q&A, they have this little section on about Claude Pro usage. And so one of the things I've been having trouble with Claude is that it hasn't been very specific about how much usage you can use. And the answer now is in this particular Q&A. It tells us exactly why that is. And the reason is not all prompts are created equal. If I were to take my entire book and give it to Claude and say, write me a couple of paragraphs about the main character of this story, that would take a whole lot more processing power than if I just asked it in one sentence to write 100 words about whatever, right? You can see how those would be two different things, right? One takes a lot more computing power than the other, and so Claude takes that into account and gives you kind of a sliding scale of usage depending on how much of the AI you're using. It's not like ChatGPT Plus where you only get 50 prompts within a 3-hour period using GPT-4. And the thing with those prompts is that they're pretty limited in how much they can process and how much they can output. Claude is capable of doing much higher output and capable of understanding much higher input. And so if you are doing these like really, really long prompts or creating extremely long outputs, that's going to count against your limit a lot more than it would without it. And in this particular instance with Claude Pro, you get 5 times the usage, according to them. Now, if you are really pushing Claude to the limit, that 5 times might not be very much still. Let's actually see practically what do these limits mean. If your conversations are relatively short, approximately 200 English sentences, assuming your sentence is around 15 to 20 words, you can expect to send at least 100 messages every 8 hours. So that's kind of close to what GPT-4 has with their processing limit, which is 50 messages every 3 hours. That's kind of similar. Often more depending on Claude's current capacity. So we learned here that capacity matters as well. Over 2/3 of all conversations on Claude AI as of September 2023 have been within this length. So this will be the majority of people, but we as writers tend to use this a little bit more heavily. So let's get some more info on that. Your limit gets used up faster with longer conversations, notably with large attachments. For example, if you upload a copy of The Great Gatsby, you may only be able to send 20 messages in that conversation within 8 hours. As each time you send a message, Claude rereads the entire conversation, including any large attachments. This is one of the downsides of the way AI works right now. Not only does it take a lot of processing power for Claude to understand your whole entire book, but every time you have a new prompt, it's going to take that as it's going to read through the entire history one more time. And so every time you're prompting, it's rereading through your entire book over and over and over again. That's a lot of processing power. And so one of the tips I have for you, if you want to cut back on this and get a little bit more processing power, a lot more prompts to use in the amount of time you have, I would recommend uploading your large file first, getting as much out of it as you can within your very first prompt, and then opening a new chat to continue your work so you don't have that old chat with all of that past information in it. That's just one of the things that will allow you to stretch that usage a little farther. Next, I go on to talk about why they have these limits. It's basically everything I've talked about. It takes a lot of powerful computing power to do all of this. They set it at a certain level so that it can be made available for free to people. And then they give you a couple of tips for ways to get the most out of your usage as well, similar to what I just gave you. They say start a conversation via the AI icon in the top left corner when you want to discuss a new topic. Claude needs to reread the entire conversation every time you send a message, so starting a new conversation will limit the amount of work Claude needs to do to continue the conversation. Bonus, Claude will also respond faster to shorter conversations because it doesn't have to read through the entire back history of it. So for instance, in the video I made where I showed you the super prompt, which is this big long prompt to write an entire chapter, I would not then say, all right, let's start the next chapter in the same prompt, because then it would be reading through my entire super prompt and the entire output that it gave me for the first chapter, and then it would also have to write the second chapter. Instead, I would open just a new thing, give it a new super prompt, and that would cut back on the amount of processing power that I'm using. Then it says here, ask multiple questions at once, especially if you're asking Claude questions about a long document, because Claude needs to reread the conversation each time you send a new message. Asking questions in individual messages would use up your limit faster than a single message with multiple questions in it. So this is a really good idea, I think. One of the things you could do, say you're creating a story Bible from your book. You put your book in there and you say, I want you to give me 10 paragraphs about this character and this character and this character and this character. And you give it several characters. That way you're getting multiple story Bible entries in a single prompt rather than having to go through and do multiple prompts and thereby increasing the load on the computer. And lastly, it says, don't re-upload files. Claude sees the entire context from your conversation, so you don't need to upload the same file multiple times unless you start a new conversation. And so this I thought was relevant information to share with you. because we haven't really gotten any clarity until now about how much usage Claude gives you. And now we at least know a few things. We know for average messages, you'll get about 100 every 8 hours. And for much larger things, say you're writing The Great Gatsby, or you've just entered a book the size of The Great Gatsby into the prompt, you'll only get about 20 messages in that 8-hour period, which is not a lot. And so you need to be careful. You need to be conservative. And I am assuming this information here, this is for the pro version, not the free version. So the free version gives you even less. So do I recommend Claude Pro for the average writer out there? I will say, if you are frequently using Claude and you are frequently bumping into that limit where it is constantly telling you that you have to wait to use it more, then I would invest the $20 a month into using Claude Pro. However, if you are not using it that much, if you are not running into those things, I don't think there is as much of an incentive for authors to invest in Claude Pro other than the extra usage. So if you are only using it casually and not creating entire chapters or analyzing entire books with it, then maybe I would look elsewhere, because that's going to be a lot for something where you could really get the same amount of quality information using the free version. We've all been using the free version up to this point. I have found it to be perfectly adequate for most small tasks. But if you're using it heavily for writing, then definitely invest in Claude Pro. The only thing that I'm curious about is this early access to new features that help you get the most out of Claude. I have a feeling that Claude is going to be releasing periodically new features that make Claude even better. We've seen this with ChatGPT all year. Every month or so, they're releasing something new. Sometimes it's a small little thing, sometimes it's something bigger, and it's always the ChatGPT Plus subscribers that benefit from that. I assume we're going to see more stuff like that from Claude in the future. And so if you ask me again in 6 months whether Claude is worth investing in for the pro version, I may have a different answer. But for now, I'd say only get it if you are frequently running into those barriers where you are constantly running into the restrictions. I will say, if you are concerned about Claude's, shall we say, moralizing of the text, where it doesn't let you do, things that you often need to do in books, like violence and all of these things, that is not going to change. This is the same model. It's got the same content restrictions. Nothing about that's going to change with the pro version. So if that's something you were hoping for, I'm sorry to say that is not the case, and I would not invest in Claude Pro at this time. So those are my thoughts on Claude Pro. I hope that was useful for you, and I will keep you up to date on any new developments, especially these new features that they talk about that will hopefully make Claude an even more appealing investment. I'll see you in the next video.